Welcome back to the deep dive.
Hey there. So for the past 6 weeks or so, we've really been digging into that National Security Commission report on biotech, haven't we? Chapter by chapter.
We have looking at all the recommendations, the challenges, the big strategic picture they painted.
Right. But this time, we're shifting gears a little.
Yeah, we're moving from the report itself, the recommendations, to, well, the first real attempt to put some of that into action, right?
Exactly. We're looking at actual legislative text, a bill introduced in Congress. This is basically the first concrete proposal we've seen to build the machinery the report called for.
And the specific bill we're diving into is the National Biotechnology Initiative Act of 2025.
That's the one. And what's really interesting right off the bat is that it's not just one bill.
Oh.
No, identical versions were introduced in both the House and the Senate. H.R. 2756 in the House.
Co-sponsored by Mrs. Passy and Mr. Khanna.
Right. And S. 1387 over the Senate from Mr. Young and Mr. Padilla.
That's significant. Identical bills, bipartisan sponsors in both chambers.
It really signals a strong level of, well, agreement, doesn't it, on the need to do something federally about biotech. It mirrors the whole bipartisan nature of the commission itself.
Absolutely. And you mentioned committees. Where did these bills land?
Oh, it's a long list, which kind of tells you how broad biotech's reach is in the House. Science, space and technology, foreign affairs, agriculture, energy and commerce, education and workforce.
Wow.
And in the Senate, it went to health, education, labor, and pensions. So yeah, it touches a lot of different areas.
That spread really underscores the point. This isn't just a science issue or a health issue, it's everything.
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to unpack this proposed law. What would it actually do? What structures does it set up? What activities does it authorize? How does it try to achieve what the report recommended?
Right. It's the blueprint for turning those recommendations into reality. So let's get into it. The core idea.
Okay, so Section 3 is really the heart of it. It basically requires the president, working through the executive office of the president, to implement something called the National Biotechnology Initiative.
The National Biotechnology Initiative. And its purpose.
The bill states it pretty clearly: to advance national security, economic productivity, and competitiveness. And it does that by advancing and coordinating federal activities related to biotech.
So linking security, economy, and competitiveness right there in the purpose.
Explicitly. And they're serious about making it a whole-of-government thing. Section 3B lists the agencies that have to participate.
Who's on the list?
It's pretty extensive. Agriculture, commerce, defense, energy, HHS, Homeland Security, Interior, State, the EPA, NASA, NSF, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the U.S. Trade Representative.
Ooh, almost everyone.
Almost. And there's a catch-all. The director of a new coordination office, which we'll get to, can bring in other agencies, too, if needed. So, yeah, definitely designed to be cross-governmental, not siloed.
That list really drives home how biotech connects to, well, food, health, defense, trade, intelligence, everything. Coordination seems key.
That's clearly the thinking. Okay, so this big initiative has a bunch of core activities listed in Section 3C. These are the things the participating agencies are supposed to coordinate on.
What are some of the main ones? Do they line up with the report's themes?
Very closely, yeah. Things like creating and maintaining a national strategy for biotech, addressing national security implications, supporting R&D, of course, to speed up innovation.
And what about data? That was huge in the report.
It's right here. Sustaining biological data, databases, making sure they're treated as a national resource. That's a core activity. Also, facilitating private sector translation and commercialization.
Getting things out of the lab and into the real world.
Exactly. And it explicitly mentions biomanufacturing, using that definition from earlier in the bill about using biological systems for products and processes.
Okay, what else?
Regulatory streamlining, another major pain point from the Commission's findings. That's a key activity. Plus, managing risks, addressing biosafety and biosecurity issues.
Makes sense. Can't do any of this without people, though.
Right. So, developing a domestic workforce, including the federal workforce itself, is in there, and promoting bioliteracy.
Bioliteracy. How does the bill define that?
It's about fostering understanding and engagement with biology and biotech, providing clear, easy-to-find info for policymakers, innovators, the public, basically everyone.
So strategy, security, R&D, data, commercialization, regulation, safety, workforce, and public understanding. That's a lot. What about internationally?
Yep, international partnerships are included too. Specifically calls out regulatory and commercial diplomacy. And like I said, there's room for other activities if the coordinating bodies think they're needed.
That sounds like a massive undertaking for the federal government. How does the bill actually propose to coordinate all this stuff across all those agencies? That seems like the tricky part.
It is. And Section 4 is where they lay out the new structures designed to do just that. There are two main bodies proposed.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, there's an interagency committee. This has to be designated within 180 days of the bill becoming law.
And who's on it? High-level people.
Yes, assistant secretary level reps from each participating agency. So, senior folks with authority within their departments.
What are their duties?
Overseeing the planning and management of the initiative, making sure their own agency is contributing, keeping other agencies informed, and communicating within their home agencies about what's going on.
How is it led?
It's got 3 co-chairs. One is a director of the new coordination office. We'll talk about that next. The other 2 are picked by the committee members themselves, serving staggered terms.
Okay, so an interagency committee with senior agency reps. What's the second coordinating body?
That's the National Biotechnology Coordination Office. This also has to be set up within 180 days, and importantly, it's established within the Executive Office of the President, the EOP.
Within the EOP. That's interesting. Why there?
Well, putting it there gives it proximity to the president, high visibility. It suggests it's meant to have, real clout to coordinate across agencies, maybe cut through some of the usual bureaucratic hurdles.
And it has a director.
Yes, also appointed within 180 days. And this director is designated as the principal advisor to the president for biotechnology.
So a central figure, close to the top. What is this office actually supposed to do? What are its functions?
For Section 4B3 lists them out. They generally mirror the initiative's overall activities, but this office is the engine room, the central hub.
Okay, like what?
Planning and coordination is a big one. Overseeing the whole initiative, providing technical support, finding gaps, running a fellowship program, managing the website we'll discuss, coordinating the annual reports, and the national strategy. Basically making sure it all hangs together.
The operational core. Makes sense.
Then there's national security. The office assesses implications, identifies and addresses gaps, including counterintelligence, and coordinates responses to things like foreign investment risks from adversaries.
What about R&D?
It coordinates sustained support for R&D, helps agencies set up joint funding calls, can propose specific focus areas for research, and importantly, is tasked with figuring out how to measure the results, the outputs and benefits of federal biotech R&D.
Measurement is key. And data.
Coordinates support for biological data and databases, treats them like a strategic resource, recommends security measures for access, works on international data agreements, and pushes for data standardization so different data sets can actually work together, which is huge for AI and biotech.
Right, interoperability. And getting products out the door. Commercialization.
Under product commercialization, the office helps strategize and coordinate those efforts. It also assists in coordinating a national network of test beds, specifically for scaling up biomanufacturing.
Okay, now, you mentioned regulatory streamlining earlier as a core activity. How does this office tackle that? Because that sounds like a huge challenge.
It is, and the bill gives the office some specific tools here. It's tasked with coordinating efforts to ease the regulatory burden, especially for products that are pretty well understood.
But what about new stuff? The really cutting-edge tech?
That's where it gets novel. The office is authorized to negotiate binding interagency agreements. These agreements are supposed to lay out clear regulatory pathways for different types of biotech products.
Clear pathways meaning?
Meaning they specify timelines, decision points, what data is required, and crucially, clear handoffs between agencies. The goal is to eliminate the confusion and delays that happen when multiple agencies are involved and nobody's quite sure who does what when.
That sounds potentially transformative if it works. What if the agencies just can't agree on a pathway? That happens, right?
It does, and Section 4B5 has an answer for that. There's an escalation mechanism. If the office and the interagency committee can't broker an agreement in a timely way,
then what?
The director of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, gets involved. OMB's job would be to identify the sticking points, negotiate an agreement, and even recommend necessary regulatory changes.
Wow. Bringing in OMB adds some serious weight to force a resolution.
It's a significant lever, yeah. It's a direct attempt to tackle that interagency logjam problem that the Commission heard so much about. And the bill requires a public plan for regulatory streamlining within a year.
That OMB intervention point seems like a really direct response to industry frustrations.
Absolutely. It tries to build a concrete process for breaking those deadlocks. Beyond regulation, the office also coordinates strategies for biosafety and biosecurity, workforce development, including a national framework and needs assessment, and those bioliteracy activities we mentioned, like plain language materials and central info hubs.
And the international angle again.
Yep, it coordinates the federal regulatory and commercial diplomacy efforts, assesses what's currently being done, develops outreach, and looks for non-regulatory ways to improve trade and market access. So yeah, it's designed as the strategic and operational center for this whole massive effort.
Okay, so we have the committee and this powerful coordination office. Does the bill mandate any specific outputs, things they actually have to produce?
Yes, several key deliverables. First, that central website you mentioned, Section 4C, it's required within 540 days, about a year and a half.
And what's supposed to be on this website?
It's meant to be pretty comprehensive. A dashboard showing federal biotech activities and funding. Plain language info for different audiences, policymakers, innovators, the public. A way for people to ask questions and get coordinated answers from the government.
Okay.
And importantly, consolidated information about biotech product regulation. This includes those interagency agreements on clear pathways, actual regulatory decision documents.
A central repository for that stuff.
Exactly. And even potentially a single digital portal for submitting applications and sharing information across agencies. That last bit sounds like a direct answer to the headache of navigating multiple different agency systems.
That website alone, if done well, could be a game changer for transparency and just navigating the system.
That's clearly the intent. The bill also mandates annual reports, Section 4D, every year, except when the big strategy comes out. These go to Congress.
What's in the annual reports?
An inventory of what activities happened and how much was spent in the past year, plus plans for the upcoming year, basically keeping Congress updated.
And the big strategy document.
That's the national strategy, Section 4E. It's required every 5 years, with the first one due within 2 years of the bill passing. It has to be made public and sent to Congress.
What kind of things does the strategy have to cover?
It's supposed to be comprehensive. Actions, goals, priorities, including how agencies integrate biotech into their missions. It needs to identify urgent priorities that aren't currently funded and estimate their cost. It asks for legislative or administrative recommendations. It also requires an inventory and assessment of all federal biological databases looking at their usefulness, security, privacy implications, plus an assessment of U.S. competitiveness in biotech, barriers to commercialization, and a specific national biological data strategy. It's the long-term roadmap.
That's a heavy lift every 5 years. How do we know if any of this is actually working? Is there oversight?
Yes, there is. Section 4F brings in the Comptroller General, which means the Government Accountability Office, GAO.
The congressional watchdog.
Right. GAO is required to review how effective the whole initiative is. The first review starts 3 years after enactment. They brief Congress at 3.5 years and issue a full report with recommendations at the 4-year mark. Then that review cycle repeats every 5 years until the initiative winds down. So it builds in regular independent checks on whether this structure is actually achieving its goals.
That adds a crucial layer of accountability. Okay, so we've got the central coordination, the office, the committee, the website, reports, strategy, GAO reviews. But what about the agencies themselves? Are they just participating in meetings?
Not at all. Section 6 specifically details agency-level activities. It makes it clear that beyond the central coordination, each participating agency has its own set of marching orders, if you will. Meaning they're directed to conduct or support specific biotech activities relevant to their particular mission: defense, health, agriculture, energy, environment, space, whatever it is.
Ah, so they're not just passive, they have homework.
Exactly. These activities often mirror the central office's functions, but they're tailored. For instance, under planning, each agency has to name an assistant secretary-level liaison. For national security, agencies need to analyze threats relevant to their sector, work on supply chain risks, improve cybersecurity for their specific data or infrastructure.
And R&D within their own area.
They're directed to fund research relevant to their mission, develop specific tools or instruments, and importantly, increase understanding of the ethical, legal, and social implications, the ELSI issues within their domain.
What about data at the agency level?
Curating databases specific to their field. Think genomics at NIH, crop data at USDA, developing AI tools to analyze that data.
And supporting commercialization, helping businesses.
Yes, using existing tools like the Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR, and Small Business Technology Transfer, STTR programs, supporting test beds relevant to their sector. Maybe providing incentives to retool industrial sites for bio-based manufacturing, providing access to specialized agency facilities like high-performance computing centers,
And on the regulatory side at the agency level.
working to establish those clear pathways within their jurisdiction, doing horizon scanning to spot emerging products that might need new regulatory approaches.
Biosafety, workforce, bioliteracy, same pattern.
Same pattern. Develop risk management plans for their area, create adaptable frameworks, do outreach, support education and training programs, students, veterans, workers, even military curricula. Support public discourse and get public input related to their specific work,
And international.
also tailored. Strengthen bilateral relationships relevant to their mission, engage in sector-specific regulatory diplomacy, support talent exchanges, work on harmonizing export controls for things under their purview. So it's definitely intended to be action within the agencies, guided by the central coordination.
It paints a picture of distributed responsibility, but hopefully moving in the same direction thanks to the central office and committee. Okay, how is this all paid for? And does it have an end date?
Good questions. The bill specifically authorizes funding only for the administrative support of the National Biotechnology Coordination Office itself, and that funding goes via the National Science Foundation.
How much?
It authorizes $22 million for fiscal year 2026, $35 million for 2027, and then $25 million a year for FY 2028 through 2030.
That's just for the coordination office's running costs, not for all the agency R&D and activities.
Correct. That's just for the office's operations staff, website, coordination functions. The funding for all the actual R&D, test beds, training programs, etc., within agencies like DoD, HHS, DOE, would still need to come through the regular appropriations processes. This bill sets up the structure. It doesn't fully fund the substance across the board.
Okay, that's an important distinction. And the lifespan. Does this coordination office go on forever?
No, there's a wind-down provision in Section 4B6. The office is set to wind down its main activities 20 years after the bill is enacted.
Wind down. What happens then?
It transitions. It's supposed to become more of an executive secretariat for the broader initiative, transferring functions where possible to the interagency committee and the individual agencies.
So the initiative itself might continue, but that central, powerful EOP office scales back significantly after 2 decades.
That seems to be the plan laid out in the bill. A big 20-year push with a strong central coordinating body, then a shift to a more distributed model, relying more on the interagency committee and the agencies themselves.
Okay, so wrapping this up, this deep dive really unpacked the mechanics of this proposed legislation.
Yeah, we've seen how the National Biotechnology Initiative Act of 2025 tries to build that coordinated federal approach. The Commission called for focusing on security, the economy, competitiveness.
Through specific structures, that coordination office in the EOP, the interagency committee,
And specific mandated activities across all those participating agencies, R&D, data, regulation, workforce, the works.
plus concrete deliverables like that central website with the regulatory portal, the annual reports, the 5-year national strategy.
And that built-in GAO oversight to keep tabs on it all.
It's really clear this is meant to be the legislative vehicle for implementing a lot of those key recommendations from the NSCEB report we spent weeks on.
Definitely. And the fact that it dropped in both the House and Senate with bipartisan sponsors right away really highlights the sense of urgency and national importance attached to this. They want to build something durable.
And this matters to you, our listeners, because this is the proposed framework for how the government plans to engage with, support, and yes, regulate this incredibly powerful set of technologies.
Technologies that are shaping healthcare, food, energy, materials, defense. It impacts national security, the economy, potentially your job, the products you use.
Which leads us to a final thought to leave you with. The bill sets up this major initiative with this strong central coordinating office for a 20-year period before planning to transition it to a more distributed model.
Right. But biotechnology moves incredibly fast, often in unpredictable ways.
So the question is, what will the biotech landscape, technologically, economically, globally, ethically even look like in 2 decades? And how might that planned transition, scaling back the central office after 20 years, affect the long-term goal of ensuring the U.S. stays a leader in this critical field?
Something to think about. How do you build enduring leadership in a field that changes so quickly, and does this 20-year plan strike the right balance?